Salute. It's your guy that Kevin speaks Vegeta's Pain, Vegeta's Pain. And we back with another episode talking about the state of education for our young people. Now, for any of you that are familiar with my content and or just had the opportunity to talk with me in person and or like I said, come across any of the content I've been putting out as of late, you would know that I've been talking about the state of education, public schools specifically, right? So while I wear many hats, right, one of which is that of an influencer. And that has afforded me the opportunity to work with young black, brown students all over the city, right, in different capacities, covering at this juncture K through 12. Right, so my sample size is large, and I have a lot of empirical data from which I reference and so to speak about. And one of the things that I've been talking about as of late is I've been talking about the behavior of black and brown young people in public schools, right, and how it contributes to the lack of learning and instruction that's allowed to take place. Right, and I've spoken with various professionals, right, some of which blame top-down structure, others talk about the young people specifically in the way they conduct themselves and how that stagnates learning in these environments, right? So what's the solution? Well, one of the many solutions that I think sort of can be real-time and implemented is we need community but parental involvement. Right? We need parental involvement. We need parents to take an active interest in their young people's educational experience. We need parents to not just hold administrations and schools accountable when their young people complain to them, but we also need parents to hold their young people accountable. To understand that you don't come to school to like the teacher, you come to receive instruction. Right? You don't come to school to necessarily have fun. And while it would be wonderful, right, if this new generation of educators can find a way to take the existing information that's needed to be learned, but use new resources, tools, avenues, and technology to make different bridges to said information. So I understand that it's going to have to be a healthy marriage between innovative styles and practices, but also cooperation by our young people. And we need the assistance of parents in order to do so in a reasonable fashion, right? So when we're talking about education, I think it's also important to note that all of our young people aren't necessarily gonna go to college. All of our young people aren't necessarily going to go on to pursue higher education. Well, what's the alternative? So for myself, right, I was fortunate enough to study under the tutelage of Dr. Ernest Lee Gibson III, and he's a Du Boisian scholar. So a lot of my early trainings, intellectual trainings, and or discussions and conversations centered around, right, academic achievement, higher learning, right, and advanced placement for gifted and talented young people. And while I still agree with many of those assertions, I was also able to study Booker T. Washington later in life, right? I was able to dive into Booker T. Washington and really understand in my mind the message, right? And whilst oftentimes historically we juxtapose Du Bois and Washington, and admittedly, right, they were two contrarian forces with two different perspectives around a similar time period, I truly believe that there was a lot of merit and validity to Booker T. Washington's notion of vocational schooling. Vocational schooling. What's one thing that we all learn once we graduate from college, for those of us who went and or studied in any type of university? We understand that someone with a skill or a trade can out-earn us twofold, fivefold, tenfold. We had the harsh reality of learning that simply because we pursued higher education didn't mean we were gonna out-earn our counterparts or mean that we were going to be any more financial or professionally stable. We had a lot of those harsh realities. So in understanding that, why force all of our young people through a bottlenecked, filtered system, cookie cutter system that doesn't necessarily work for everyone? Why not introduce vocational schooling at earlier ages, alternative routes and different options that focus on specific skill sets for young people who might have identified what it is that they want to do ahead of everyone else? Or for people that we identify that may have challenges that can be offset by learning a functional trade so that they can navigate, produce for themselves and or potential family one day. So really, when we talk about these notions of the direction of how we should solve the issues that we have, I truly believe we need parental involvement so we can curb the behavior of young people, because it is completely out of control in certain school districts. In certain school districts, the behavior is so erratic and out of pocket that instruction can't even take place. Certain school districts are fully outfitted by substitutes. Certain places, right, our young people are being shortchanged. They're being socially promoted and they're reading at grade levels, sometimes 3 to 4 grade levels behind where they are currently. And while I'm not clinically trained in any type of psychology, right, it doesn't take all of that schooling for one to imagine what that starts to do to deteriorate one's confidence, one's willingness to engage, right, if they're not gaining and grasping the material but then moving forward. So one of the things that we need to address is we need to figure out as a community, how is it that we address our young people's behavior? Because here's what's also true. I don't personally believe, as a man of color, any system works inherently in my favor or, unfortunately, at the very least, fairly. But what I can acknowledge is that when you enter into different academic institutions, the textbooks open up and there's words on the pages. The chalkboards work. You can write on the chalkboards. The smart words work. So what am I getting at? I'm getting at the fact that whether you think there's a mass conspiracy to cap our people specifically, and I'd agree to a degree, whatever the mass conspiracy you believe is happening, there are also functional shortcomings happening, explainable shortcomings, where you don't have to reach into sort of the ambiguous in order to grasp at something that might explain it. We can actually point to certain things that are hindering the learning process in real time. So like I said, I think we can start to attack that. But a deeper conversation is, I think we need to revive the discussions between Booker T. Washington and Du Bois as it pertains to education in the Black community. What does that look like? How do we take both notions? Because here's what's true. Whenever there are two competing forces, oftentimes the real answer is a happy medium. So we know that. So while we always have rivaling factions, the truth is the most centered views are always in the middle. How do we bridge Du Bois's notion of highlighting and identifying the talented 10th amongst us, right, and sort of supporting them as a community so that they can be properly trained and come back and pour back into our communities, our villages, and our conglomerates? And how do we bridge that with Booker T notion of identifying those, right, who would be better suited to pursue a skill, a trade, or a craft? Because in my humble opinion, having individuals who were identified early as either not the strongest academic students and or having an early interest in a specific skill or trade, I guarantee would do much better for our overall populace, and to have those people working functional jobs where they can provide for themselves and their loved ones, right, and be law-abiding and productive citizens. So like I said, I wanted to talk to you all. I do think the circumstance in education is dire, and I think we need to have these conversations. With that being said, we need parental involvement and community involvement in order to curtail and curb the behavior of the young people so that instruction can take place as it fully should in most, if not all, environments. But then we also have to revive the discussions between Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois, right? That at the time were served as competing forces and juxtaposed against one another. But I truly believe we can bridge those two notions to better serve our overall population, right? So please like, comment, share, subscribe. Let me know what you thought about the video. If you agree with me, please let me know. If you disagree with me, please do so respectfully. But hop up in the comments and let me know that. And if you just have an alternative point, right, and introduce something else to the universal conversation, please don't hesitate to do so. And I'd also like to ask you all to follow me on Instagram at the Kevin Speaks, my backup page, Vegeta's Pain, right? Obviously here on YouTube, share the video, the Kevin Speaks Vegeta's Pain, on TikTok, the Kevin Speaks, and on Clubhouse, the Kevin Speaks. And then lastly, I'd like to thank you for the time it took to deliver this message. One love, salute.